Big Séance Podcast, Episode 68. Jason Kupzyk.
Welcome to the Big Séance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the séance.
Hey there, my paranerd friend. I hope this episode finds you well. Chances are you've already been playing Pokemon Go today, or maybe you're playing now, which is horrible. But if you're playing, be safe, find a park bench. No, actually, close the app and listen to some Big Séance, would you? I actually had a conversation yesterday with the young woman who cuts my hair. And since I'm not hip to this Pokemon stuff, she was trying to explain it to me. I was telling her how creeped out I was that there could be invisible critters living in my house and here in the parlor. I mean, first of all, I don't get it. Pokemon in pop culture just missed me. I guess maybe that means I'm too old. But I also don't get who is putting these monsters and characters out there. Do they just show up? And did someone place them in my house? That's creepy, right? She pointed out that I'd be cool with a ghost in my house, and I was like, well, yeah, of course. My new friend Gavin assured me that Pokemon are cool, and I should be honored to have awesome Pokemon critters in my house. I don't know about that. So, no one in this house has been playing Pokemon Go, for sure. But it's definitely one of those things, obviously, that will change the world and gaming and phones, I'm sure. And actually, it's kind of refreshing to see all this Pokemon Go stuff online during a particularly rough summer of news with all of the tragedies and attacks we've been hearing about. It seems like almost a regular basis now. It's so sad and frustrating. So it's almost like everyone getting out to play this game is counterbalancing all of that in a way. And that's cool. Anyway, this topic is so not paranormal. I didn't expect to release an episode this week. And in fact, at the end of last week's episode, I teased that the next episode would be my really cool interview with Tim Stevens, who is an independent film producer and director. And I'm working on that for next week, but here's why you get a bonus episode for this week. I just had the opportunity to talk to Jason Kupzyk, who is the founder and the man who puts together the Kansas City Paranormal Conference, or KC Paracon. I'll be attending this conference and sitting there with a table and hopefully grabbing some interviews. And since I had some time, and since it's just a few weeks away, it's August 6th and 7th, I figured I needed to put a quick episode out just to let everybody know. We also ended up talking a bit about haunted locations in Kansas City and some general paranormal investigation chatter. So that's what you're going to hear today. Since it's a little last minute, I don't have any listener feedback or anything like that, but I actually did convince the awesome Tim Prasil to come by with a cool Spectral Edition a little later. And you'll want to hear it because this time around, he's got Tales from the Morgue. I've got goosebumps already. So let's get right into the brief conversation I just had with Jason Kupzyk. So here I am with Jason Kupzyk, and Jason is a paranormal investigator and founder of the Mid-Continent Paranormal Research Society out of Kansas City. He's also the founder and host of Kansas City Paracon and the co-host of the Ectoplasm Show with his co-host Josh Hurd. And the reason why I'm talking to Jason today is because I am getting ready to attend, just in a couple of weeks, my first Kansas City Paracon, and this year's Paracon is in its 5th year. So, Jason, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm super excited for this year's conference.
I am too. You know, I'm from Kansas City area originally, but I was not the giant paranerd then, that I am now. And so I'm kind of out of the loop on Kansas City stuff as far as the paranormal goes. And so I'm excited to get there. Can you give us some of the highlights that we should expect to see or hear from speakers and events going on this year at KC Paracon?
Sure. Yeah, we have both local. It's split down pretty much down the middle of local speakers as well as national speakers. All of my speakers donate their time, and then because of that, I'm able to keep the ticket prices really low, just $10 a day, which I don't know of any other conference out there that has that kind of prices. And I've always been lucky with that. So our keynote speaker this year was our keynote speaker my very first year, and this is his second time finally coming back, is Antonio Paris. The first year I had him, he ran a group called Aerial Phenomena, and he used to be a member of MUFON and left out of not liking how MUFON was going. Anyways, he focuses on UFOs. His background makes him pretty credible in that he worked for the CIA and the DOD and all this other stuff in the government, and now he's a teacher in Florida and trying to become an astronaut.
Wow.
So I can't wait to hear what he brings this year. The first year he released his documentary on Area 51 at the conference. So as with the rest of my speakers, I have a general idea of the topic they're going to be talking about, but I don't micromanage them. I let them feel free to do with the hour with what they want to do. And if it doesn't work out, then, or if, they can change it next year, but I'm not going to be like, well, I need you to talk about this and I need to know exactly what you're going to be talking about. So, Like I said, I'm not sure what he's going to be talking about this year, but I'm sure it's going to be interesting.
Well, and I can tell by looking at your schedule and your speakers that your conference kind of takes care of the whole umbrella of the paranormal, whereas, the last conference I went to was more kind of on the ghost paranormal activity side. So what are some of the other topics that we're likely to hear about at the conference?
Well, Scott Nelson, he is going to be speaking on Bigfoot. He's attended he's spoken at every year except for the first year, and he focuses on linguistics of Bigfoot. His background, he was a crypto-linguistic officer in the Navy, and now he teaches several different languages at the school in Lexington, Missouri, the military school.
Hey, that's where I'm from. Cool.
Yeah, and he's been like on the Joe Rogan show, one of his TV shows where they question everything. I don't remember the name of it, but he has the credentials to know what he's talking about in language, and he has a bunch of tapes of what he claims to be a Bigfoot language, and he'll play them and talk about them. Now, I also have Frank Bennet. This is his first year, and he does various different things, but I believe he's going to talk about Bigfoot as well and an experience he had in the woods with Bigfoot. Jeffrey Daugherty is a speaker that's going to speak on religious fallacies and religion within the paranormal community. This is his first year, so I'm not quite sure where he's going to go with it, but I've heard a few of his shows. He has a show, if people want to look him up, his last name is spelled Daugherty. He does a daily show, a radio show, where he talks about these very subjects. So you can go and find out, his views somewhat on his show. Josh Hurd, my podcast co-host, is going to be releasing his second documentary, A Brush with Evil 2. We're going to play it at the end of the day, both days. And it's a psychological mind bender. I haven't seen it personally yet. He's just doing the first showing the end of this week, and the first public showing will be at the conference.
Cool.
We have Heather Hunter and two guys in the know. They're psychic mediums, and I think one of them's going to be doing a gallery reading. Heather, we gave, like I said, I try to give them the hour to do with what they want, and she's talked about doing a gallery reading, so she may be doing that. They will both be available to do readings while they're not on stage. Some of the local guys, Rob Garcia, David Glidden, Brandon Callahan, and Steve Hayes, they all run ghost hunting groups, and they all have different things that have happened to them that make their stories interesting that they're going to be speaking about. Stephen LaChance is out of St. Louis. Have you met Stephen?
I have not met Stephen. I've read some of Stephen's work, and he's one of the guests that I'm super pumped about.
Yeah, I'm excited. This will be the first year for him as well. But I don't know if you've seen this. He's planning on leaving the field, and my conference will be one of 3 of his last conferences he ever does. Unless things change in his plan.
It's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I don't want to go into detail because I don't want to speak for him, but something happened to him. He told me about it. Something happened to him so much that it affected him so much. He's decided to leave the investigative side of the field and stop doing conferences. I think he'll still be involved with, some other aspects of it. But yeah, I've never met him before, and I'm excited to meet him and talk to him and see his presentation. Larry Flaxman is an author out of Arkansas, and he just got picked up for a show on the History Channel. And I don't have the name of the show off the top of my head. It hasn't aired yet. He's going to be going around doing different conferences such as mine, talking about that show, as well as his various books. He has books on anything from 11/11 to ghost hunting tactics to actually pull up his profile or his bio right now so that I can make sure.
But gosh, the History Channel, that's quite a grab.
Yeah, he's written books about 11/11, the mysterious signs, sequences, and synchronicities, hidden infrastructures of reality in viral mythology, how the truth of the ancients was encoded and passed down through legend, are just some of the titles of his books.
And he pairs up with Marie D. Jones a lot, doesn't he?
Yes, he does, actually. And he's been on Coast to Coast and various other shows, so people out there have probably heard of him.
Right. He, along with Stephen LaChance, definitely, when I saw that on your list, I got super excited.
Yeah, actually, they both, well, no, actually, Stephen, I think somebody I know knew him. A movie producer guy in Kansas City knew him. That's how I got hooked up with Steve. Larry reached out to me to come to the conference this year. So I've been really lucky in building a good, solid reputation, and now I'm having speakers come to me, which is nice.
That is cool. What inspired you to put, the Paracon together? And I mean, it's probably a loaded question because I know what the answer is, but what is involved with putting together a conference like this?
Well, what first inspired me was I had my group running for a few years, and there wasn't anything in the area, but a friend of mine, a member of the group at the time, wanted to go to one in Chicago. And it sounded really interesting. I really wanted to go, but at the time I didn't have the money to spend to go to it. So I was like, well, why don't I just try to put one together here? So it took me about a year to get everything worked up for the first one. So it was because I couldn't go to one somewhere else at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also saw the prices that they were, having people pay to come in. And I just decided to put one together of my own. I mean, there's not much to that story. But as far as trying to get everything coordinated and ready to go each year, now a lot of my speakers are returning speakers. So I don't have to reach out, and people come to me somewhat now. So I do still reach out to various people each year, but the schedule, the number of speakers is already usually there. a year before the next one. So this year is the first year that we're reaching out to sponsors and we're having more vendors such as yourself come in. And we're just growing. Like next year, I think we're going to have to go to 3 days because I had to turn down the amount of speakers that would take to fill another day that we just didn't have available at the venue this year. So yeah, next year we're going to go to 3 days. And the biggest, what I work on most is just marketing, just trying to get the word out there for the smallest amount of money as possible. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can pay to get the word out there, but there's a lot of free ways if you take your time to really get the word out there, which is what I've been focusing on. It takes up a lot of my time.
Now, I know people are still buying tickets out there, but do you have any idea of how many attendees you're expecting this year?
Right now, we're at a few hundred. The venue itself holds 500 attendees. So we're about halfway there with 3 weeks to go, but we actually have a big press release marketing push going out right now. And one of our sponsors is doing that as well as another sponsor. So yeah, we have a whole push going out and we're hoping to sell out. It's possible. If not possible, it'll be really close. And
so to check out more about the conference, people can go to kansascityparacon.net, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I hope people do, and I'll be sitting there with my nerdy table just kind of promoting my podcast, and I just can't wait to meet people on that side of the state and network and see what's going on. Now, tell us about, really quick before we go, tell us about the Ectoplasm Show. I just started listening, and I love when I find, especially local paranormal podcasts out there. Tell us about the Ectoplasm Show.
So the Ectoplasm Show, my friend Josh, his friend Myron, decided he wanted to do a podcast about 1.5 years ago and roped Josh into it. Josh didn't really want to do it. At that time, I actually took a break from the paranormal for about 1.5 years. And during that 1.5 years, I wasn't involved with the conferences, but that's another story anyways. So Josh decided, yeah, I'll do it with you. And then about 30 episodes in, Myron decided that he was going to move from where he lived and start a new career and stop doing the podcast. So Josh tried to do it on his own. And you do yours by yourself, correct?
Correct.
It's really hard to do a show by yourself, and I give you props for doing that. He was struggling, and I was just coming back to the point where I decided I'm not permanently leaving the field. There's things that I still want to do with it, so I just hopped on board, and now we do 2 episodes a week. We release a news episode every Tuesday and a topic episode every Friday, and once a month, it's either topic or interview. Once a month, we do a conspiracy episode as the topic. This week, if the first episode you download is the most recent news one, Josh couldn't make it, so I just threw a bunch of our listeners' music onto it. So the one, if like, I don't know which one you just listened to, but if it was the most recent news episode, it's not like our regular show. But we bring about 8 or 9 news stories each week for the news show. And then, like this week, we just recorded an episode on the Montauk Project for Friday. And that's basically where we're at with the show. I think we're at episode 126.
Well, I've listened to like 3 or 4, so I've listened to enough to know that you guys know what you're doing, but you also are entertaining and have fun as well.
Yeah, we try not to take it too seriously. I don't know. It's really the way Josh and I are on the show is how we are when we're off the show together. So
that's cool. Well, this might be kind of random, but what are some of the most haunted locations in Kansas City? Where's all the excitement at?
Well, the most well-known one that people can regularly go investigate for a little bit of money or whatever is Belvoir Winery, which is the old Oddfellows Lodge in North Kansas City. Personally, I haven't been out there because right now I haven't been investigating as much because I've been focused on the conference. But when I do take on investigations, I tend to get requests. So I don't necessarily go pay someplace to go.
Right.
I would like to go to the winery sometime. I just haven't had the opportunity.
I went there for a TAPS event a couple of years ago. Actually, it was very cool. I was glad to have the opportunity to be there. Yeah.
Union Station is well known to be haunted, but they don't allow groups in. I mean, it was done by, I think, Ghost Adventures, and they kind of screwed up the investigation. And I don't watch Ghost Adventures. I just heard about it. Apparently there was a party going on in part of the building, and the Ghost Adventures crew didn't know.
Right. I saw that.
Elms Resort in Excelsior Springs is pretty well known.
Mm-hmm.
Capone stayed there for a while, apparently, and they have lots of activity up there. I guess those three. I mean, there's other ones like the Savoy Hotel. That one doesn't ever get investigated because it's an active hotel and they don't let groups in, obviously.
Is that the one they just recently renovated and it's like beautiful now?
I believe so. It's a downtown hotel, an old hotel, big high rise. I've never actually been in it. I was just trying to think of ones people might know outside of the area.
Okay, so this is me breaking into the conversation really quickly. As I was listening to the recent episodes of Jason's Ectoplasm Show, I heard them mention the John Warnell House in Kansas City. Denicia, who is a paranerd and a listener of the podcast, and she's in the Big Séance parlor a lot, actually, she introduced me to the John Warnell House. I'm pretty sure she volunteers and runs tours and maybe some investigations there. And it was this house that led to her being featured in an episode of My Ghost Story a few years ago. So I asked Jason about the house. And I lived in Kansas City long enough to know that many people pronounce it Warnell.
Oh, yeah, Warnell House. It's John Warnell. And I haven't investigated there either. I mean, it's a historical house for Kansas City that they keep as a sort of museum to the family, and it's gotten a reputation of being haunted. They do open investigations for people to pay for Halloween, and I know the person that used to run those investigations. But like I said, I haven't really had time to have to pay a place to investigate, and that's one of those places that everybody in town goes. And I'm not necessarily against that. I just haven't. That's not where my focus has been.
I founded a team several years ago, and we were active for about 3 years. And I had an issue with, like, I was so overly serious about it and wanted to be there for the research and helping people. And so many teams out there are just going and paying and having fun in all these places. And I kind of had an attitude about that. I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to help people. And so I did. We took as many cases as we could, as people called in, and we had some cool experiences. But when people stopped calling, and eventually they did, and I thought, you know what, this just must be my sign. And I refused to just go out there and find fun places.
Yeah.
I was kind of weird about that.
I could see that point of view. And honestly, I probably was the same at one point. My whole view on everything's kind of changed. Not necessarily my core view on the paranormal, but there's so much competition out there now. And a lot of people view it as competition. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the problem between some of the drama between groups is competition. But I'm not going to fault somebody if they just want to go out and have fun doing this. I don't think they bring the community down. Honestly, they might, if they do something negative, obviously I don't like that. But if people want to go pay to go investigate these places, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. And I typically don't either. It was just, for me, that was not my mission, I guess. And that's not how I viewed our group. So if I were to ever jump back into it again, it probably would honestly be more of the just for fun side of things. And, every now and then I'll do some of the touristy ghost hunts and tours and stuff like that. But, it's not the same.
That's one thing that I've, like, now with my group, I don't really have an active investigation group anymore. I still keep the MCPRS thing around because I don't have any reason to get rid of it, but
Right.
I'm like a lot of my friends in the field now. They're kind of almost like paranormal free agent investigators. I go with whoever wants me to come investigate with them.
Yeah, and I've done that too. I've been fortunate to be invited on a few investigations from the Joplin Paranormal Research Group, JPRS, and they've it's always a big trip whenever I have to drive down there, but that's been kind of exciting. I think they're a pretty good group down in the southern part of the state. I've talked to them online,
but I haven't met them.
They're pretty fun. It's been a couple of years though.
That's one thing that I really enjoy about the conferences, because I get to meet so many people from around my area and network with them, and it's how I met Josh from the Ectoplasm Show.
Mm-hmm.
I met him. I had him at the second conference I did. In fact, it's how I've met most people, is the conference.
Well, I certainly look forward to it, and I look forward to meeting you. And, I want to try to get to more of these things. And I'm super excited. Is there anything else you want to throw out there and share with us?
Some of these speakers that have been here before have been interviewed by a man named Adnan Ademovic. A lot of them you can find on other interviews, but every year he has a YouTube channel called UFO Hub. I think it's two separate words, UFO Hub, or you can search it together. I'm sure you could both find it either way. But he comes every year and he interviews them on video, most of the speakers, and then he puts them up on his channel. So if you haven't heard of these people and they've been on the in the conference before, you can probably find an interview just of them talking about themselves on that channel.
Excellent. Yeah, and I hope to, just for my listeners, I hope to grab a few interviews, on the floor as I see people in between speakers and things like that. So,
well, I'll tell you, the City of Sugar Creek is one of our sponsors. They are lending us their emergency preparedness vehicle. Hopefully there won't be an emergency at the time, but we're going to be able to use it as a mobile, well, it won't be mobile, but as a studio to do interviews. I'll be using it for the Ectoplasm Show. Adnan will be using it for his interviews. And if you feel like using it, you can as well.
So there you have it. We really didn't end our conversation as formally as I usually do, but I do want to thank Jason for coming on the show and talking a little bit about the Kansas City Paracon. If you check the show notes, I'll put the link to Jason's show as well as a link to where you can get details about the 2016 KC Paracon. And maybe I'll even see a few of you there.
You're listening to the Big Séance podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
And now, let's go right to Tim Prasil.
Welcome to the audio version of Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil. Now, these ghost reports that I've found in old newspapers have a variety of settings. They're very, very often haunted houses, but occasionally there are morgues. And a morgue strikes me as a place where one should almost expect ghosts. Here's an article that is about exactly that. The title is Ghosts Haunt Marin's Morgue. Deputy Coroner Eden startled by uncanny noises issuing from coffins. It was published on May 15th of 1897 in the San Francisco Call. San Rafael, California, May 14th. Deputy Coroner William Eden is willing to take his oath that there are spooks in the Marin County morgue. The spook craze has apparently struck San Rafael with as much force as has the prize-fighting fever, for the story about the morgue being infested with uncanny creatures follows closely upon the tales told by prisoners confined in the haunted chamber in the Marin County Jail. Deputy Coroner William Eden is a son of Coroner Eden and well known in San Rafael, where he has lived all his life. "Last Tuesday night," said he, "I was sitting in the front office of the morgue at about 11 o'clock talking with a friend. Suddenly I heard a noise like an animal scratching the ground. This was followed by the noise of the moving of some object over the floor. The sounds came from the room just in back of the parlor where we were sitting. Thinking that it might be some person in the room, I went back and, opening the door, stepped up to the gas jet and pulled the cord which lights the gas. In the room are a number of cases containing coffins. As I turned up the light, I saw the cases move distinctly. There was a sudden flash, a noise, and that was all. I was frightened, for I could not make out what could possibly cause the disturbances. My courage returned, and I set about to investigate. I looked over the entire establishment, but could discover nothing amiss. I returned to my companion and told him of what I had seen and heard, and he left immediately, and has not since been back. The room was formerly used as the old morgue, until we fixed up another in the rear, and it may have been the ghosts of some of the departed that returned. I might assign the strange experience to some other cause, but not a long time ago the coroner, my father, was putting on his coat in the rear office when suddenly some unseen power gave it a jerk which almost pulled the garment out of his hands. He thought at the time that some of the boys were in the office and had done it for a joke, but when he inquired about it in the morning, none would confess that they had anything to do with it. The Marin County Morgue has been located on C Street between 4th and 5th for many years, and Coroner Eden has been in charge of it for over 20 years. Many bodies have been received and placed in the room where the deputy coroner saw and heard the strange noises the other night, but now the room is used as a storeroom for coffins and ghosts. To tell you the truth, I think they got off pretty easy considering it's a morgue. This is Tim Prasil. You've been listening to the audio version of Spectral Edition. I have almost 300 of these articles, and I post one each Wednesday on my website. The website is called The Merry Ghost Hunter, and I hope you stop by sometime.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Séance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And thanks for being so supportive. The number of people engaging in conversations and helping to get the word out on social media has really increased. And I don't keep up with thanking people as well as I used to, but if that's you, I hope you know how much I appreciate it. And it's been a long time since I've asked you to help us out by making sure that, first of all, you have yourself subscribed to the show, whether it be on a podcast app, in iTunes, on Google Play Music, Stitcher, or TuneIn. Subscribing in one of these places makes sure that you get the newest episodes delivered right to you, so you don't have to go searching for us or go to the website to play it. Though some people like to do that, and that's okay too. There are so many good podcast apps out there nowadays, so if you have a device of any kind, look into that. I think you'll like it. I often recommend the iOS podcast app, which is the one that's already on any iPhone or iPad. It's usually purple. And I also recommend an app called Overcast for iOS devices. That one is my favorite. I'm not an Android person, but I just did a quick search, and AndroidCentral.com says that as of April 2016, the top Android podcast apps out there are Pocket Casts, Beyond Pod, Podcast Addict, Dogcatcher, Player FM, Stitcher for Podcasts, Antenna Pod, and Podcast Republic. So check those out and introduce a friend to the show and get them subscribed as well, would you please? You guys rock. So this time, I'm not fibbing. The next show, which will be next week, will be my interview with Tim Stevens. You're gonna love it. See you then. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit BigSeance.com. Just click on the Big Séance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and we've just been added to the Google Play Music Store. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line at 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.